to the channel. As I had showed you in the last video, that we had the two quads. We did get the little one going. It seems to be pretty happy. We're still ironing out some bugs on it, but overall it seems to be all right. So today I'm going to focus the attention to the Arctic Cat. In an effort to not be redundant, we pretty much did the exact same thing we did with the little carb, with the carburetor with the little quad. Took it apart, took the wire trick that he showed, cleaned all the jets and everything out, and got it all squared away. And it runs so good. It's really happy, which was great. We were super duper stoked about that. And then we drove it, and the rear brakes were like. So anyhow, I'm going to do a video today on fixing the brakes. I got to figure out what they look like and everything, so that way I can order the parts and get it fixed up. I've already tore it apart because I completely screwed up and forgot to push the record button, to be honest with you. So anyhow, enjoy the video, and we're just basically gonna do this, show you the tearing it apart process and how bad the pads are, and all that, and we'll get this thing fixed up so that way we can go rip. We're gonna go camping in I think 2 or 3 weeks, and 2 weeks actually. So we really want to have this thing ready to go because, you know, out in the woods, this thing's gonna be a blast to drive around. So anyhow, enjoy the video. All right, so as I explained, since I had messed up and didn't push the record button and do the videoing of this, so basically what I did is I took the tire off, and I just took the caliper off of these two bolts here, and to put the pads on, to get the pads off, there's a little cotter key right here, and then a pin, and you just pull the pin out, and this is what the brake pads look like. They're so the little pin on the top here goes through, and that's what holds it into place. And as you can see, they've seen better days. So the next thing I need to do is probably get a rotor and pads both after reviewing the damage that's been done. I thought I might be able to get away pad slapping it, but that's just not going to happen. So anyhow. That's going to be the next step, is I need to order some parts to get this thing fixed up. Hopefully good old Amazon will hook it up and get it here in a couple days. That way I can get these brake pads changed out, and we can go rip this thing. All right, so as I stated earlier, we ordered some parts for the quad, and everything showed up. I got the pads for the mechanical brake yesterday. Unfortunately, I was in a big rush, and I already opened them up and made sure they're the right ones. But anyhow, FedEx just showed up with the rest of the parts. Anyhow, I just wanted to show you what I got, and it's pretty cool. So yesterday, I happened to pick up this little helmet for the kids. A friend of mine's kids have outgrown it, and as you saw in the video, my previous video, the kids were using bicycle helmets while they're riding the quads around. Not exactly, I mean, it's safe, but not where we wanted to be. So luckily we hooked this up. Thank you to Jessica for that, because these things were expensive. I was rather surprised at how expensive little helmets are. And anyhow, on to what showed up today. So what we have here is, we went ahead and upgraded and got the drilled rotor. It wasn't that much more expensive than the standard solid rotor, so we figured, what the heck, let's go ahead. Being as all the mud, water, and crap that we're going to be going through, makes a lot of sense. Let's go ahead and get that, and also got a brand new set of brake pads. I'm going to go out later on and make sure that they're the right ones. And what else do we got in here? Oh, look at that. These guys were nice enough to give us a beer cozy, or a drink cozy as it might be. A little shout out to Race Driven. They seem to sell a lot of parts for quads, especially Arctic Cats. So had to give them a shout out. Anyhow, so unfortunately I'm not going to have time to go out and mock it all up and make sure it works, but anyhow, pretty cool. So I should be able to, hopefully tomorrow, I should be able to throw this thing together, and that way I can make sure it all works and fits, and everything will be happy. Not too bad either. 63 bucks. Can't beat that. I could have probably done a little bit better, but you know, at the end of the day, I wanted to get something that was actually going to be reliable and work. And everything seemed to look a-okay. Anyhow, all right. So as I showed you, all the parts showed up. So now what I'm going to do is just make sure that everything fits and do a mock-up on it, and make sure all the parts are happy. And if for some reason it isn't, then of course we will contact the people that I bought them from. But it seems to look pretty legit. As you can see, the rotors are identical and they're the same size. The bolt holes all line up. Oops, sorry, I guess I should keep that in angle. So the rotors are the same size and the bolts are all happy. Cool, think that'll work. So how this works is these 4 bolts hold it on like that. So what I'm going to do is take these off. Make sure this is just a mock-up phase. I still got to clean the rotor off. They put a spray on here to keep them from rusting, so be sure to wash that off if you're doing this at home. Make sure to wash all that off, because that will contaminate the brake pad and cause it to not work properly, make noise, all sorts of bad stuff happens. So I just wanted to make sure that it fits. And these bolts are shouldered, and that's what holds the rotor in place. So that's the most important parts, to make sure that that fits in there right, and that because I don't want this to move and waller out the hole, because then that can cause all sorts of problems. Perfect. Just like it's supposed to. Perfect. All right, moving on to the next part, the brake pads. Perfect match. Perfect match. Sweet. Now when I ordered these pads, they called for Arctic Cat 300 cc, and it was a 4x2, so I was a little worried that that these might not fit. But did some brainstorming and thought, well, the brake package between a 250 and a 300 generally doesn't change that much. If you start getting up to the bigger bikes like a 400 or 500, 600, I could see where they would want bigger brakes. For 50cc change in the engine, I can't imagine the pads being different, and thank goodness I was correct. All right, fantastic. So that's happy. And last but not least, the mechanical brake pads. They're cute little guys, little tiny suckers. All right, well, here's the old one, and it just got full of metal from the old rotor being metal to metal, and that little slot there is basically gone on this one, so it's pretty much worn out. So if I'm gonna go through all the trouble of changing the rotor and the pad for the main brake, I'd be kind of foolish not to change these. That, not to mention, these are like $12. Might as well change them. Anyhow, that looks perfect. It should work just great. All right, awesome. So everything seems to look like it's gonna fit perfectly. So I think what the next thing I'll do is I'm gonna take the rotor back off, clean it off, and then I'll start assembling all this. So I will go to time lapse, and that way you don't have to sit here and watch me clean all this stuff up. And when I get it all mocked up and everything, then we will. When I get it all set together, then I'll show you how the pads fit in there and get that all set up. And we should have this thing done in a jiffy. So I got the hub, I got the rotor mounted to the hub, I got the hub all bolted on. It's real simple. This is just a splined, it's just splined into the axle. It just slides on, tighten the nut up, and then I put the cotter pin in there. That holds it all into place. So next we'll move on to putting the brakes in the calipers. The first one here, this is pretty straightforward. This is the mechanical brake. First thing you're going to want to do is back this nut all the way off so that you can get these as far apart as possible. And that way you can, because if they're adjusted to the brake pads that are thinner than this, then when you put these fatter pads in there, they won't fit over the rotor. So back those all the way off. And worst case scenario, there's another adjustment up there by the mechanical foot pedal that I may have to back off also. I'm going to go ahead and just try and do it with this one right now. And the pads are pretty simple to put in. They're square, so there is no up or down. It just slides right in, and it just pops in there like that. And of course, make sure the friction material is towards the rotor and not towards the caliper. You don't want to use the metal backing to to stop it. And it's a pretty straightforward little deal. You just slide them in there like that. And I'm trying to do it one-handed here, but okay, just like so. I may have to go to a time lapse on this deal. It's kind of hard to do one-handed. Anyhow, you kind of get the point. They just sit inside that little aluminum slot right there, and that's what holds it into place. Okay, part two is the hydraulic brake. This pin just goes through the top of the caliper, and it has this clip on here that holds it into place. So what we need to do is take that clip off and then pull this rod out. The rod goes through the hole of the brake pad. Once again, make sure the friction material is towards the rotor, not towards the caliper. And so basically that just holds that in position. And the other thing you're going to want to do is to push the pistons back in. Since they were this way, they were facing outwards because the pads were thin. Once again, this is going to be too narrow to fit over the rotor, so you need to push these both back in. I try to get them as flush to the housing as I can, or as far as it'll go, and then mount the pads, because you don't want to push on the brand new pads and get foreign debris on them or gall them or anything like that. So I just take like a screwdriver or pry bar or something like that. Or best case scenario, take the old brake pad, stick it in there, and then push these pistons back, hang the new pads in there, and then it's just a matter of sliding it onto the rotor and putting the bolts on. Anyhow, this should be pretty straightforward, and I'm going to go ahead and go to time lapse because I'm going to fumble around with this a little bit, and I'm sure you guys will get the gist of it once I get this thing all put together, and I will explain from there.